Morning, everyone. Today is Wednesday, the May 16th. And I thought, after that long video yesterday, I thought, people are probably wondering where all this is coming from. And also, where can I view the papers? Well, the papers are able to be found on the Electric Universe Gateway in the Start Learning series. They're over on the right. So you can see the videos I've done with Catherine on the left, and the papers are on the right. Right, so why Electric Universe, Plasma Cosmology, and why did I decide to create the extended Plasma Electromagnetic Cosmology, EPEMC? Well, it all goes back to the Hidden Destinations in Kentucky project. Okay, so what you've got to understand is that I've been traveling around Kentucky for 5 years, digging into locations and digging into the past. And that led naturally to Native American sites. And the Native American sites led me into discussions, because it was very obvious to me that mainstream archaeology had poor explanations. And I've never been into Atlantis, or I actually was never interested in Egypt, to be totally frank with you. Right? China was my interest. So in India. But in the process of uncovering facts about the Native American cultures, Mesoamerican cultures, it became obvious to me that, well, first of all, I learned how Clovis first had died. It's wrong. Clovis first has totally failed. And so I started really seriously looking into, diffusionism. That led me to the Ancient Kentucky Historical Association. About the same time, or maybe just before that, I started watching an Electric Universe video. Now, bear in mind that the Electric Universe only started to make sense to me when I went to the shelf and pulled off the rock art of Kentucky and started finding the plasma petroglyphs here in Kentucky. Right, now I didn't find them, right? Fred Coy and his group found them. But for myself, I started to actually see real proof. And these archetypes that have been all over the world, why would mainstream archaeology not talk about the most important? For example, I was just reading in the Saturn Myth by Dave Talbot today, and it's talking about our typical symbol for the sun, which is a circle and a dot in the center. And going through that, the myths of the floating islands, Ogygia, and all around the world, there was this floating island and an enclosure around the god, a belt, a shield, protection from the forces of darkness and chaos, and in general a cosmic egg. And now that strikes a chord, because I know from Taoism that there is also a cosmic egg in the story of Pengu. And so now we begin to see, who Pengu is. Pengu is also Saturn. Written much later, but again, alchemists often wrote things later that were from texts that they had acquired in their, studies and doing things around as they would travel around, and they would gather knowledge and they would re-record it and sometimes reinterpret, but often very faithfully they would say straightforward, like the alchemists, they'd say, Helios is Saturn. Shamash is Saturn, is the sun. So when I started to look at all the evidence, which is all the mythic testimony, cross-cultural, look at the archetypes, it became very clear to me that not only was there diffusion going on, but there was catastrophic geology, catastrophic movements. There was proof of more than just, because before, for me, the flood had been either a mega tsunami caused by a comet or major storm flooding, and the world was, as much as they knew. But when you really look into it, if you look into, say, Hamlet's Mill or Fingerprints of the Gods, you're going to see that every culture around the world is talking about not a regular flood, but something really, really large. And it became also clear to me that the flood and the deluge were different. And so we're looking at repetitious cataclysms. And when you start following, so if you follow in the scientific pursuits, you have to set aside your predeterminations. Right? I came from Big Bang cosmology. I was trained in electrical engineering. I grew up watching Discovery Channel, and BBC, and so I know all the accretion models, the solar fusion model. It's always amazing to me. People think they're going to educate me on how science really is, and I'm sitting there going, I mean, you're talking subjects that I mastered when I was in elementary school. I was insane. I had in elementary school, there was an earthquake and hurricane and tornado book, and I was like the only kid checking them out for 4 or 5 years. I mean, it was just my name over and over again, okay? So I was that kid. It's no wonder I'm such a big nerd. Anyways, so when you start with a scientific premise, you have to be open to the possibility of being wrong. And although I didn't want to believe what I'm seeing in Symbols of an Alien Sky and in Thunderbolts of the Gods, it sounds kind of woo, it sounds kind of nuts. They keep hitting on all those missing holes that I mentioned in the last video of where science fails to explain something. Not just OOP-arts, but failed theories, things that don't make sense. For example, the glyph that I mentioned, the Aten or Atum glyph, having a dot in the center. The sun doesn't look like that, right? And the frequent mentions of eyes and belts and obviously of the rings of Saturn tells you right away that mythic people could see Saturn. But we know today that you can't hardly, I mean, nobody even cares. Only the most dedicated astrology adherents care, and they have no idea why they care. And it's obviously soul memory and cultural memory being passed on. They don't know. I even had a guy argue with me. He was like, it's all symbolism and it's all, micro functions and fractals, and he's using these complex ways of explaining why astrology would be important. But the truth is, back in the day, astrology and astronomy were one science. They were separated, and the question is, why did they separate? Well, because at one point, Ho-Yi or Mars shoots the other 9 suns, and they go away, and all that's left is the 2 solar discs that you see, Apollo and Aphrodite. So there is a entire history that is repressed there. And on top of that, it's important for us to bear in mind when you do science, you start off with a hypothesis or an assumption, but you also remember that you could be wrong, and be open to the fact that you could have to revise and later on say that you were wrong about something. So I was wrong about string theory. I have all these articles on my hidden blog about string theory. Total nonsense, okay? And I was wrong about saying that dark matter and dark energy are 76% of the universe, and that's probably where spirit chi comes from. I have a paper on academia.edu, which I have actually said in one of my papers that this supersedes and redacts, where I said that chi may be scalar magnetic waves. Okay, I no longer think that. Although maybe there are scalar electromagnetic waves, I don't have any proof. But now that I know about plasma cosmology and how authentic plasma cosmology, this is an important thing. It's actually older than Big Bang and relativity cosmology. Only quantum is even close. And realistically, not really, because plasma cosmology is an extension right out of electromagnetic cosmology. So we're talking going right back to, the only thing that beats it is the gravitational theory and the laws of motion. So plasma cosmology goes way back to the middle of the 1800s. As to why, Big Bang became more successful, that's all gets into politics and pomp and clicks and popularity, and I don't have time for that. Now, as regards with me, my quest to understand diffusionism, my quest to understand catastrophism, and, important to you, my quest to understand Chinese Sciences and Metaphysics, the origins of Taoism were what drove me. And now I have them. Okay, the Cosmic Egg, Tao, Hundun. I know what those were. And if you want to know, then read my paper on the origins of religions and get books like The Saturn Myth, and then you will have the answers too. But my interest is, how do we reduce the equation to simplicity? Because we're looking for the unified field. As you know, for example, that electromagnetic waves don't require a medium like ocean waves or sound waves. Why? Probably because magnetism probably is the medium, right? It probably is the unified field, the ether that we're all seeking. Which would mean, ironically, that Distinti probably, even though he created new electromagnetism, he's probably wrong in his ethereal mechanics. And I suspect that his Vortrix algebra, this is my prediction about Vortrix algebra, since I brought it up yesterday, is that it's going to describe the relationships of matrices, and the matrices are going to describe the relationships of fields. And that what we're really talking about is how to calculate, not just calculate fields, but how to calculate their entirety, their energy, their force, why they matter to other fields, like how those things are all interacting. So that's my prediction there. But I just want you to know, how did I get to plasma cosmology? Well, because standard, fusion, and Big Bang, and relativity, which don't match, none of those three match with each other. No matter what they tell you, they don't match. And dark matter has failed utterly. And they're trying to lie about it and say that they've proven it exists by proving it doesn't exist. When that happens, you have to look at it and go, well, can this answer my questions over here? If it can't explain Chinese medicine, Chinese sciences, Chinese physics, if it can't explain Native American myths about ancient destructions and megafauna extinctions, if we can't figure out why ice ages were happening using standard cosmology, then you have to say, you know what, this got us only this far, but it's wrong. And because it's wrong, now I'm going to look for something else. I just happen to be the guy that is bringing forth a more unified approach to it. Obviously, I had to modify Hollow Earth. I had to modify Expanding and Growing Earth. I had to modify the electromagnetic Earth. Although the work done in plasma electromagnetic sky fields is really impeccable. You'll see in the paper, which is now up, by the way, you'll see that it is. There are some real giants of history: Ralph Jurgens, Langmuir, Birkeland, Peratt. These guys, Donald Scott. I tip my hat to all these kinds of geniuses that really, because okay, people tell me I'm smart. Let me tell you something. I can't be too smart if I just blindly followed the cosmology and shilled for it for so long, attacking anybody and telling them how dumb they were, all because I was atheist at the time, and just believed what I was told on Discovery Channel. I was a kid raised in the vein of public school and public institutions, the University of Kentucky, a regular Joe, right? And if I can be easily tricked, I can't really consider myself a genius. If anything, though, my genius is in bringing things together, and that's what is happening with these papers. And that's why I want to promote them to you so that you can understand, right? And on the next video, when I talk about EPEMC again, I'm going to talk about the electrothermal vine. So if you go and you read the PIMS paper, you'll know exactly what we're talking about. And I hope that you like, share, and subscribe. I hope you enjoy the papers. The next one, I have a number of different ones that I'm looking at. The magnetic universe. I have the amusement park Ferris wheel side paper, and the handbag phenomenon paper, and I came up with another one, and it's, they just come to me now, and I feel like I need to, there are all these weird things, and they all are related, and that is Tao. That is Tao. The reduction the Occam's razor principle of making things simple and explaining them very straightforward, that's Tao. The fact that the Nordic have this symbol, and it looks like it has trigrams, and there's 8 of them, and there's Vajra tridents tying Greece, China, and the Nordic peoples all together, that is, to me, the essence of that kind of research, of integral sciences, of inductive sciences. And it may not be appealing to some people, right? Some people, they think you got to separate all these things, right? Mayanology has nothing to do with Egyptology, has nothing to do with psychology. But I'm going to tell you that that's wrong. And I'll give you an example. You would think that time, the study of time, would have nothing at all to do with these ancient days. Well, you'd be wrong. Because the very word chronos, or chronology, harkens back to the time when Saturn marked our time. It wasn't the sun rising. There is record around the world of when the sun began to rise and set. The sun existed, but bear in mind that the god of the sky that lit up at night and set people's souls to religious worship was Saturn. And Chronos, or chronology, all had to do with the changing of the brightness and the dimness of that star, of that celestial body. And that's it. I mean, that was the god. You want to know where the one god came from, that's it. If you look into all the myths, it's very straightforward. El is Saturn. And if you go far enough back, El, Shamash, Helios, Cronus, they're all the same being. And that is a huge revelation, for me at least. And maybe it isn't for you. Maybe you knew all this stuff already. You might be the genius who knew all about this kind of thing, or you knew it in your own way. However, for me, it's a big journey going from mainstream cosmology to this kind of cosmology. And that's what is driving me right now to write all these papers. So hopefully that explains that a little bit. And I hope you have a great day. I'm going to go inside and do some work. See you later.